Planning. Good evening and welcome. My name is Adam Block. I'm the chair of the planning board and finding forum members present. I call this meeting at May the 6th to order. And I also note for the record that Natasha is unable to make the meeting this evening. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid manner consistent with current state regulations and is being recorded. All materials for this meeting are available on the town's website at haydenma.gov. We have a special meeting tonight in advance of the town meeting. On our agenda is really a focus of the discussion of town meeting warrant articles. I don't think we have a report from our director, and I don't think we've corresponded to the project. We're not going to deal with minutes tonight. We may or may not get to our schedule. But the first question for us tonight is an amendment to Article 20, which is the solar zoning bylaw. And with us as a special guest tonight is Mr. Lance Brown, town meeting member from this precinct.
Precinct A.
From precinct A, who has tendered a motion to amend our zoning bylaw amendment in a couple of areas. And we're going to have a discussion to understand the changes he intends and why. And then we'll vote momentarily on this. And then there are a couple of other items on the warrant that I want us to take a note on as well. But let's focus first with Mr. Brown. Are you able, Lance, to want to talk about your amendment?
Sure. I will go relatively quickly, especially over the first couple of things, because I think the more consequential one is about impervious. So there are I guess there are four elements to this, or really three topics. The first of which is just in this material, point you all to it, because I assume you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at.
Yes.
So the motion itself is probably the easiest thing to look at because it all fits on one page. So in the first part, it's changing the Latin abbreviations IE to EG in one place, specifically a building material. And those four items are examples of building materials as opposed to the only building materials that would apply. And
So let's take this one at a time. So you're on, so we have two amendments, is that right? Or,
I only have one, there's
Well,
one.
Chris and I worked on an alternative to the,
okay,
Oh, and that's great to hear because I understand there is some substantive issue with 3 and 4 here.
right.
And I'm very, amenable to that. I even brought it up in our correspondence. I was concerned about that. So I'll move quickly through this first two.
I don't see a problem with that, the change that he's making there. Does anyone else see a problem with that?
From IE to EG?
Yeah.
No, I've done it.
Okay. Right. So that's friendly.
Okay, and I'm tempted to jump to the very last little thing because it's the same thing. Second part of 4 was the same change, i.e. CG, in that the parenthetical is an example of an application of the rule applied in 4. So it's not too confusing, and we can cover that one as well.
Yeah, I think does the board have any problem with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's friendly. That's fun.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Those are the easy ones.
That's exactly.
Right, that's why I'm trying to breeze by these ones. And 2 is, in the passive solar energy system definition, revising, as you can read there, changing or to and without. The reason being, otherwise it could be read that a passive system is one that does transfer energy by heat exchanger, which was not the intent.
The question of solar system passive was raised at the League of Women Voters.
Right, I brought it up, just
You're
asking
the
why,
one who brought it up,
why is that even mentioned? Because it's not,
because it's not mentioned, yeah,
Yeah.
so maybe we ought to just delete the definition from the bylaw, because it's not even.
It makes no difference to me.
It does, I mean, at some point down the line, there may be something. I think Lee was simply saying, okay, what are the ones that a lot of other towns perhaps have had?
Right.
Here's one, okay, we're not using it now, but perhaps in the future we'll be using
Is
it.
this from Dewar?
I think it was from Natick.
Or Native?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Chris Heap will tell you that I don't use words if I don't need to use them.
That would be-
As a general rule, if you
Delete
don't
it.
use the phrase in the bylaw itself, there's that, you know. I
So
would say
strike
there's
it,
no
strike
for it.
One thing I would say is that there are places in the bylaw that talk about rules about active solar systems.
Right, but not
Mhm.
passive.
And so if it doesn't say active, then it applies to all. If it says active, it doesn't apply to passive.
Right, if we do something with passive, then we would have to add the definition somewhere down the road, but.
A concern I had, which is a little extreme, is that that a window could be considered a passive solar energy
Yeah,
system.
which it is, yeah,
Well,
it is, yeah.
it's certainly not an active solar system, but the point is, if you had a passive, if you defined a window as a passive solar energy system, which you could construe this to be that, then you'd have rules about what you could do with
Okay.
windows.
If we're gonna keep the definition in, I'm in favor of the amendment because I think it does clarify. The meaning that we have.
Should it be or and? The way it's currently written is and without, or
Yes, should that be or instead of and?
No, it's saying it's a system that,
After solar
that
light-
does capture without transforming,
Right,
and it captures without transferring energy. So without transforming, this really calls for like a sentence diagram, doesn't it?
Mhm.
But, it doesn't do either of those things.
but if it
And
does
since
one
you
but
can't
not
use-
the other, then
You
it's
can't
not
use
passive.
parentheses in words the same way you can with math. So instead of using parentheses, you use the right set of words
Yeah,
to make the associations clearer. I'm an engineer, so I'd love to use parentheses in sentences, but it would just get too confusing.
We were all saying.
that explains it.
Yes, exactly. We were all saying, and I think I said it to you, like, we should really be having you review all of our zoning beforehand, because you bring up these very interesting and important points, so, and make our.
You wanna have
make
it
our zoning
designed
more
for
precise.
the plan book?
Maybe it can be a proofreader or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to take a step back, because you made a comment, which I don't, and Artie, I think, incurred, and I don't know if it's correct, and maybe I misunderstand the concept. We had understood as part of the research that we were doing for this, that there are building materials. There are a part of like paving materials, and there's siding and windows that can capture the energy of the sun and utilize that in some way to create energy for the building. Does that make sense? The power.
More like to hold it.
In some ways, passive is related to the structure as a whole. In many ways, it's.
More so than active?
Yeah, because there's passive components of a building. I mean, there are components of the building which add to the fact that it's a passive building.
So,
But we're not saying the building's passive,
No, I
we're talking
understand.
about the
Yeah.
solar system is passive. So
there are materials that deliberately store energy by absorbing, solar energy and then giving it back to your building at night when you need it.
Yeah.
that can be, so. it
That's
is
a
used.
passive aspect.
And similarly, a window, literally is a passive solar system in the sense that it is letting heat pass through it. And a window that's got the right coatings on it lets more heat in than
Right.
out.
But I thought it was treated with material that captured the energy, separate from the transfer of, like going to my house and the windows are a sieve and it gets really cold in the winter inside the house. And the room can get really warm in the summer when it's humid outside. So separate from that issue of ambient temperature transfer, in terms of the actual electrical function to power a building, if it's being used to have, it's one thing to capture it, it's another thing to store it, and it's a third thing altogether to be able to convert that into power.
But anything that would
active.
involve conversion would be active.
Yeah,
Make
that's,
it
that's
active.
not,
Right,
that's not
true,
passive,
true.
that's not related to passive at all.
So then on. So what is the point of what is the benefit of a passive system if it doesn't convert energy?
From what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
it's your field. From what I'm hearing is this passive system will store the energy that it's getting during the day. And then at night, it will passively emit that
Power?
stored energy, that heat into the building so that the building is not using as much fossil fuel to heat the building because
So it's
the
nothing
heat,
to do with electrification.
No.
not
No.
nothing to do with electrification, it's just being stored in the materials. And then as the building gets cooler, the heat that's
released.
inside the materials is released into the building.
The
Right, the
material-
low-tech version of that is
Yeah,
concrete.
the materials act,
stone.
the materials act like a sink,
Right.
they just act like a sink storing the energy, they're just a
Okay.
sink.
And so now that we've talked about it, I
So-
think I'm comfortable with a window actually being considered a
Passive.
passive
Right.
solar energy system. And I hope that there aren't any restrictions in this bylaw that prohibit, windows
That
and
kind of
concrete to
passive.
be used.
No,
Only if people are throwing stones.
that captures solar light or heat without transforming it into another form of energy. And without transfer, yes, that's fine, I accept it as and, thank you. Next,
Okay, so,
Okay. Did you want me to?
no, go ahead.
So both of the next ones are about, not inadvertently including in the exempted lot coverage area. That was too complicated. So,
well, first of all, where are you?
where I am in
Right.
3 and 4 are substantively the same thing. They apply to
Number-
different
In number 3.
numbers
number
on
4?
the amendment,
Yes, okay,
of which there are 4
yes. got it.
paragraphs.
Okay,
So they are the same change essentially to revise the, extends beyond impervious area, to be more specific about what areas that applies to, since the section is about, I'm looking for it, maximum percentage lot coverage.
right,
So only things that would count
toward,
towards maximum percentage lot coverage should be exempted.
so here
The
is,
specific example of which is in parentheses at the end of this page, which helps understand the intent.
right,
If you're putting a solar energy system on top of a roof and it does not extend in any way past the roof, that is part of the structure already was accounted for in the maximum lot
so we're not
coverage.
double
building.
counting, right.
Right,
So if we have a lot. And we have a building. And there is a parking lot here.
Well, let's take the roof first.
So I think we're clear that our intent in the creation of this thing is that as long as the roofs, any part, so we're already clear that that's the intent. We're not gonna double count. But if you have something overhang here, 3 feet by 10 feet, that's 30 feet.
Yeah.
That additional 30 feet that's outside of the footprint of the building would count towards lot coverage.
right, and it's unambiguous if it extends beyond the building over grass, a pervious surface.
Right,
Correct.
Where it is ambiguous is if it is over a driveway or a patio.
so to that, again, our intent is to not, our intent then, if I understand this correctly, is to not actually count.
If the canopy were located over a parking lot or a driveway, the intent is not to count that structure toward lot coverage.
Because, sorry,
Only to the extent that it goes beyond that parking lot edge.
Or if it's on a building, then it extends beyond the building, but still over in.
Because if you don't exempt it out, you won't get
So-
any structures built over parking lots.
so think of
Right.
it this way, you own a house and you have a driveway.
Mhm.
So the driveway, if I understand this correctly, the driveway to the house does not count as lot coverage.
Correct.
Right.
Now, as a result, as an incentive we want people to have solar canopies, so we're excluding the canopy over the impervious surface of the driveway in that sense. So that way it doesn't count towards lot coverage, the same way the driveway underneath doesn't count as lot coverage. And in fact, because the driveway underneath does not count as lot coverage, we don't want to, we don't want to impose that rate, a negative consequence for someone trying to go solar.
Okay.
So that's the intent.
I didn't understand that until you explained it here. My concern with that would be that, does that end up incentivizing the creation of impervious surface for the purpose of being able to put solar over it?
So I love engineering. And the reality is, life is a bit of gray. In other words, it's possible that someone may do that. But the likelihood of someone trying to create an impervious surface for the purposes of not covering, like, if it's not a practical application. What is a practical application is if someone says, oh, I want a space to put my barbecue. I'm going to create some kind of an impervious surface in the back. And if I had paving stones, is that pervious or impervious?
Depends on
It's pervious.
Shaving stones.
So it would have to be asphalt. So you would like cover in asphalt, your part of your backyard for a barbecue, which is great, because when it's 1,000 degrees.
I guess backing up to your question about paving stones, I was picturing like crushed rock when you said that, but if it's concrete pavers with like, with the special sand, elastomeric sand,
That's impressive, yeah.
that's not the right
That's
word.
not very pervious, certainly.
It's not. So that probably, you can have attractive patios that are, you can also have concrete, that's also considered impervious.
Right, for
And it
sure,
can be
that's
attractive.
right, that's what I meant when I said asphalt, so I think. There is a circumstance, there could be a circumstance where someone does maybe want to. Have a barbecue outside, and at the same time, they're gonna be able to get coverage from the rain because there's a canopy structure over them. And that surface area could be impervious. The only exception that I wonder about is if we're dealing, and we're talking about a house, like it's a really small.
No, but we're also talking about business.
Commercial.
Yeah,
We're also talking
That's what I
about
was getting
commercial
at.
districts.
So if we look at a commercial building where there is impervious surface, like a sidewalk, for instance.
Or a parking lot.
Or a main.
It's really a parking lot because the zoning is structured so that a building basically is built out at the lot coverage standard. So if you don't exempt out the canopy that goes over the parking lot, you won't get any canopies built. Because the building is already grabbing
Yeah,
the lot coverage provision. So the reason it was designed this way was so that if the structure went beyond that parking lot area, then it got grabbed as coverage. But as long as it sat over that existing parking lot, it was exempted out in order to enable it to even happen.
mhm. What about where a parking canopy extends over the parking lot? Then that does count. Which I guess was the intent. It's similar to a ground mount system where you do count the area of,
Right,
not just impervious surface, but the surface of the panels.
yes, exactly.
It's not counted as coverage. It's not counted towards building coverage. If it's
Lot
a
coverage.
It's
If
not,
it's-
it's not covered, it's not counted, the intent was not to count the canopy over a parking lot
Oh.
toward lot coverage. And the
In a
reason
commercial
is
district too.
in a commercial district.
I was saying where the lot, or the canopy extends past the end of the.
Oh, yes,
impervious
yes,
surface.
Yeah,
yes,
that
yes,
part,
yes, then it covered, yeah.
Yeah,
All right, I think I understand the intent and I'm fine with striking these two changes.
okay, good.
I thought it was not meant that way, but now that you've explained it, I get it.
And so I
Artie's
think,
gonna do an even clearer job than I did now
No,
at town meeting.
No.
And
we
Tim is-
need something written up, no.
should we just drop ours or clarify it?
Well, I think, so one thing Lee and I were talking about, this afternoon was the idea, whether or not the rule that solar canopies over parking or driveways doesn't count toward maximum percentage of lot coverage appears as clearly as it might in the existing ground use zone,
Right,
or whether we need to make that more express than it already is in the zone. Because I think there was some, I've just been within the meeting, within the past 5 minutes, I've heard that we do count those and you don't count. So the question is whether we want to make that clearer. And if the answer is yes, whether we want to make that clearer before the vote, or whether we clean that up,
Next year kind of thing.
in the fall.
Yeah, it's right. I,
With the
Well,
understanding that the bylaw.
I mean, whatever we're doing, I need, something spelled out here.
well, yes, we actually drafted that language.
Yeah, that's the red line.
That's what the red line represents.
That was,
To those,
So-
to those,
the simple solution is to effectively. As far as I'm concerned, you don't even really have to speak to Lance's first two amendments.
Mhm.
Because they're effectively grammatical corrections.
Mhm.
As opposed to these other substantive changes
Mhm.
that he's withdrawn.
Okay.
So you would just roll with your presentation as is. That's the easiest thing.
Mhm.
And then in October, we'll say, thanks to Lance, we're gonna call this the Lance Brown Amendment. And we're gonna clarify the language on this if no one else brings it up.
Does that mean we're not having any changes to it?
We're gonna have the EG changes.
Yeah.
So it's 1 and 4, right?
1 and 2.
One and two.
Oh, it's not.
One, two, and part of. Okay. That sound right? everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Actually,
Yes.
oh, yeah, that is Justin's.
Okay, so
And that's gonna be up on the screen for everyone to see what's changing, so they know what they're voting on.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get up and say,
So we're
we
not
have,
going
we
to
have, we have,
change
we have no objection.
during your discussion,
Mhm. Mhm.
you're gonna present as is.
Mhm.
Because I'm assuming you probably used the deck that I had, and it's not literally the language of the zoning bylaw.
It's not the language, yeah, I
Yeah.
put some modifications
So
in there
roll with it as
essentially,
you
so,
are.
yeah.
When it comes to the discussion of these amendments,
Mhm.
then we'll have up on the, I expect we'll have up on the monitor for all of town meeting to see
Mhm.
the changes, hopefully in a red line version of 1, 2, and part of 4, I think you said,
Mhm.
and then,
I don't know that the board would be expected to speak to that. I would expect Mr. Brown to.
Sure.
right,
speak to that
That's
or something.
and then on behalf
At
of
the
the
board, we
board,
could,
the board will probably at some point,
Very simply say the board has no problem with
Yes.
this.
Yes,
Yeah.
these are friendly amendments,
Yeah.
and we look forward to working with Lance.
Mhm.
Well, I wouldn't use the word friendliness.
or working, we're looking forward to
So I
working.
can say that. Now, what I will say is we've got 6 minutes before town meeting starts, and we have a few other issues we have to deal with. Lance, are you satisfied?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
It's been a very interesting exercise,
Yeah.
and I think we have all learned a lesson tonight. I'm grateful, genuinely.
I certainly have.
And,
You're getting proofing all around.
yes,
Exactly,
exactly,
exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, does someone have easily accessible the warranty?
Yes.
So as we're looking at the warrant, we have a few other things to take positions on. In particular, we'll take Article 45 first, and then Article 44, and then Article 45. So with respect to Article 44,
You already voted that.
we voted that. So what I'm gonna do, so when someone's gonna say, well, what's our position on the amendment? I'm already speaking. I've already prepared something to speak to our citizens petition. Which is to say that the planning board voted to reject. Planning board voted to recommend town meeting reject Article 44. And I give a list of reasons why. And I also say in that comment that we recommend town meeting reject it and not a motion to refer. So we have basically, we're unrestricted in our own approach to dealing with this, which I think was your point all along.
Yes.
So I may stand up again and speak to John's amendment on that point.
Yeah, it's not really an amendment, it's a motion to refer.
Yes, exactly, that's right, that's right. So then, with respect to Article 46, this is from the citizen petition proponent to have $150,000 study on a separate study on the MBTA community act compliance. And Paul, what do you think? Do you want the town to spend that money twice for the same thing? What is that?
Well, since you word it that way.
I think
No,
Simon and select
well,
board have already taken a position in opposition.
Well, we haven't voted a position, but
Yeah.
yeah,
you know,
I think we probably.
We haven't been,
I will move that the board's position is that the amendment, that Article 46 should be voted in the negative.
Correct.
Second.
We have.
well, I want to say, I mean, we haven't been part of that discussion at all during the home. We are not part of that discussion when all that work was going on. So we don't have,
I mean, not as a board, but we.
well, we got the report back, but we were not part of the discussion. We don't have to take any vote on it.
I
We
think.
don't have to. There's no need to.
I hear what you're saying. We, right now, we have a motion on the floor here.
Mhm.
We have a motion by Paul, a second by Justin. We've had discussion. I'm gonna come to the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
I'm gonna abstain.
And Artie abstained. We've recorded that for the minutes. Artie's abstained. That's fine. And I'll speak to that when that comes up. Maybe on Wednesday, next Monday night. Yes.
Right.
Now, before we go.
You're prepared to speak on Article 9.
I'm preparing to speak on Article 9. And then I also would like to take a position on Article 22, which is the appropriation. And I know appropriation is not ordinarily our thing, but we are an appointing authority to the CPC. And part of that is in recognition of the financial role that CPC plays on behalf of the community as a whole. And on the basis,
What page is that on?
page 55, Article 22. And on the basis of the fact that the establishment of deeply affordable housing is a goal of the planning board, I intended to speak on that and to encourage town meeting to vote affirmatively on Article 22.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the planning board votes in the affirmative for passing Article 22, the expenditure of
I'll
funds.
second.
So we have a second by Paul. Any discussion here? All in favor, please signify by saying
Aye.
thank you very much. And then is there anything else?
Okay, yeah, sorry. No, I can focus.
And then correct it.
So lastly, in terms of the motion, the article to remove the restrictions, I would also like to see us vote in support of that article, because although it's an instrument
Remove what restrictions?
for the.
For the deed,
housing
the deed.
authority, the deed restrictions. I'd like to see the planning board approve that, recommend the town meeting approve article.
Okay.
Deed restrictions. are-
Yes, sure.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, the motion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
I think it's-
Mr. Chair, I move that we continue this meeting until after town meeting.
Second.
We have a motion second, any discussion? Hearing none, will come to vote, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Let's go to town meeting.
I gotta check in.
Yeah.